Irreverent, entertaining, cool. You're listening to LA Talk Radio.
You're listening to The Inner Voice with Dr. Foojan Zeine, only on LA Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Inner Voice Show. I'm Dr. Foojan Zeine, and this show is about you and all that matters to you and in your life. I'm going to bring you the latest research in the human sciences field, and I will talk to experts in this field, and you can get the jewel of their knowledge, of their being, and their experiences. I would love to hear from you, so if you'd like to contact me, call me at 818-648-2140 or email me or go to my website at foojan.com. I'll be right back.
Dr. Foojan Zeine is a psychotherapist, a marriage and family therapist, and a life coach with more than 27 years of experience. She is the author of the Awareness Integration Model, which has been researched and published in numerous international journals. Dr. Foojan has offices in Beverly Hills, Irvine, and Woodland Hills, California, and also consults online and by telephone. Make an appointment with her today by calling 818-648-2140 or go online to www.foojan.com. That's www.foojan.com.
Now, with all that's going on in the news, I'm sure you've all heard it, but I wanted you to know that the American Psychological Association has written a letter to President Trump warning of the lasting psychological harm of family separation and asking the administration to reconsider its immigration policy. Decades of research have demonstrated that family separation can lead to anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder. Among other conditions, the organization writes, they ask that the administration alter its immigration policy so that families can stay together throughout the legal process. And APA President Jessica Henderson Daniel and APA Chief Executive Officer Arthur Evans wrote a letter on June 14th that says, based on empirical evidence of the psychological harm that children and parents experience when separated, we implore you to reconsider this policy and commit to the more humane practice of housing families together pending immigration proceedings to protect them from further trauma. One important element to consider is the duration of the separation, because the longer children are away from their parents, the more likely they are to develop harmful physical and psychological problems. Lisa Fortuna, the medical director of medicine and adolescent psychiatry at Boston University School of Medicine, says, the psychological trauma of separation stems from the interconnection of the neurological growth and social growth. Children develop a sense of relational concepts such as attachment and safety as the neural pathways that govern critical systems flooded by stress and fear. And pathways can become impaired. The initial impairment can ultimately lead to anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder. When the parent is not there, it's almost as if you were trying to walk a tightrope and someone pulls the rope out from under you. The person at the center of your being who keeps you safe, alive, warm, fed, and loves you is gone. It's like taking everything away from you that holds you up. That in itself is a traumatic event. Furthermore, immigrant children are often escaping stressful or violent experiences in their home country. Love and support from their parents help children cope with the situation and decrease the likelihood they go on to develop anxiety and depression. The closeness, even being able to see one another, has biological implications for how that child responds to stress. Fortuna says, stripping the child from their guardian decreases the chances of the child emerging from the stressful circumstances. The effects of the family separation currently occurring at the border have not yet been documented, but scientists can extrapolate from data on young immigrants who are unaccompanied minors of seeking asylum And in those population, around 30 to 40% of children have PTSD and around 50% have anxiety. Now, the psychological toll of family separation stretches even further beyond the individuals at the border. A sociologist at the University of Albany, Joanne Derby, says that the studies of immigrant children who were separated from their parents and those who were not, the separated children exhibit upsetting behaviors such as inexplainable crying and inability to concentrate in school and feeling like their heads are exploding. But children whose parents were not detained or deported were also affected by deep fear and insecurity that their parents would be taken away. The government is using fear to police their border, and that has an impact on the children who live near the border or even far away from the border, and that has devastating fallouts.
Have you ever wished you could just wake up one day, reach across your nightstand, and hit the life reset button? Let's face it, the struggles and frustrations of everyday life leave millions of women and men around the globe yearning for a new way. And the new way is right here in Life Reset, the awareness integration path to create the life you want, by Dr. Foojan Zeine. You can get it now at Foojan.com or Amazon.com. Life Reset, the awareness integration path to create the life you want. You deserve it.
We have a new disorder. The 5th edition of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorder and the American Psychiatric Association has decided that internet gaming now is going to be a disorder. So internet gaming disorder, a new phenomenon. The internet is now an integral and even inescapable part of many people's daily lives. They turn to it to send a message, read news, conduct business, and much, much more. But recent scientific reports have begun to focus on the preoccupation of some people develop with certain aspects of the internet, particularly online games. The gamers play compulsively to the exclusion of other interests, and their persistent and recurrent online activity results in clinically significant impairment or disorder and distress. People with this condition endanger their academic or job functioning because of the amount of time they spend playing. They experience symptoms of withdrawal when kept from gaming. I have clients who their children are getting really violent and upset and hit each other when the parents are actually taking the games away, and it's really impacting their sleep at night. Much of this literature stems from the evidence from Asian countries and centers on young males. The studies suggest that when these individuals are engrossed in internet games, certain pathways in their brain are triggered in the same direct and intense way that a drug addict's brain is affected by a particular substance. The gaming prompts a neurological response that influences feelings of pleasure and reward, and the result in the extreme is manifested as addictive behaviors. Further research will determine if the same patterns of excessive online gaming are detected using proposed criteria. So now you know, gaming is the new addiction. I think we all knew, however, now it's official based on the American Psychiatric Association. Don't go away. I am so excited to have Sandra Pate with me. Sandra Pate is a transformational relationship coach who has a passion for empowering women to overcoming emotional trauma and heartbreak. She helps women identify limiting beliefs so they can step into their power, discover their authentic self, and live their purpose. If you would like more teaching and strategies to heal your heart, trust yourself, and build the relationships you have always desired, go to www.happinessafterheartbreaksummit.com. Welcome, Sandras. I'm so excited to have you with me.
Well, thank you for having me, Foojan.
I know that I was part of the summit and I really enjoyed our conversation. And now I want to hear all about you and your coaching and transformational relationship work that you do with people.
Wonderful.
Tell me about you and how you got here. What brought you into a transformational relationship coach?
So it's a journey that was something that I felt like was one step led to the next, as they often do. I started my career early on as a pharmaceutical rep and sales trainer, and then moved into some real estate, and then through my own journey through heartbreak, I was in recovery and healing my heart, and then really stepped into a position of helping other women, facilitating groups with other women, and discovered my passion for helping women. And so that's where I am today. For a couple of years now, I've been running groups helping women heal their heart, and with a system that I have developed that I found helpful during my own recovery, just like a system of a three-step process, really, of really determining where you came from,
yes,
understanding the dynamics that shaped your life and the decisions that you've made as a result of it, discovering the authentic self, and then creating a new vision as 3 steps that I take people through.
Wonderful. Sandra, it is so important what you do because women across the world have higher level of depression than men and higher level of anxiety. So a broken heart really alleviates, it maximizes the depression and the anxiety. And sometimes we hold on to the struggle that's there versus having the ability or the know-how of how to let it go. And the role of women is so important in the life of their children, in raising their children, in what we do in the industry or work or in our marriages and in our relationships. And the more that we can learn how to clear our heart and allow our love to show the nurturing part of our femininity to come to the world, it just seems like it makes the world a better place. So thank you for what you're doing.
Absolutely. Yes. No, I totally agree. I do feel like, the pain of heartbreak really just keeps us in bondage. And so the reason for my program is to help people to overcome the heartbreak and to live, in their power and their purpose, and to live their greatness, because, we all have a purpose in our life and greatness that is often, with our heartbreak, we just suffer and we cannot express our true selves because we are so shut down emotionally. And so what I really try to do is help women step into, courage and face their pain and acknowledge their hurt. So it is a process of really taking a deep look at yourself, and is being open to looking self-discovery and self-identification. And often it is a very, very difficult process, but very rewarding in the end. Because when we can recognize, where we're suffering, then we can feel, greater love. And that's always the goal, is to step into healthier relationships.
And when you talk about the heartbreak, are you mostly talking about intimate relationship heartbreak, or is it more any type of relationship or any type of heartbreak?
Well, so, I think heartbreak is heartbreak. I mean, in our society, betrayal is epidemic. So in my work, I tend to find a lot of women struggling with betrayal, but also verbal abuse, dealing with a narcissistic personality in your life are usually the three things that people come to me with, but I have a lot of different situations, so I would never say, everyone's in this situation, but I would say 70 to 80% have had betrayal of some sort. Occasionally, it's a betrayal of addiction, other than infidelity. Sometimes it's, somebody's overspending and, or either because of a shopaholic or like gambling addictions. And then that also is heartbreaking because you've taken away somebody's security, financial security. So it's really about healing your heart and building trust and having healthier relationships. And the work that I do, I help women and men, but mainly women is what I focus on. I really help women take a look at the first step that I help them look at is where they came from, and have them take a look at their family of origin, what their family system was, what their attachment styles were. And the reason being is when we can look at who our family was and the system in which we were raised, then we can understand ourselves better and what our emotions and our behaviors are. Because most of our behaviors and emotions are like an iceberg. I'm sure you've heard this analogy before, where our behaviors and our emotions are just the tip of the iceberg of what we see, and everything else is under the water, meaning that the things that we have experienced in our life, they become, our core self is developed by the time we're age 7. And so it's primarily our family system that shapes our idea, our story about ourselves, how we perceive life, and gets embedded into our subconscious, which then creates the automation of how we act and respond. So in order to understand the dynamics that shape our lives, it's important to examine the family system. And so what I do is to take people through that process to understand that under the water is, any attachment disorders or attachment, whether you had a secure attachment or an insecure attachment, traumas, as you were just talking in your research earlier, if you've been separated from your family, then there is a trauma that is deeply integrated into what you believe about yourself and ends up having a PTSD or complex PTSD. Also looking at, gender pathology, meaning what your family or in society told you about your gender and the opposite gender, and how we then relate to that. If we're told that women are the primary caretakers, then that's what we believe. Or that men are, in order to be men, they have to know how to change the oil in their car. It's just stories that our family have told us, and we interpret it as truth. And then also personality traits such as ADD or dyslexia or any other learning disability all affect how we behave. And as you were talking about earlier, whether we numb out in coping mechanisms that we develop, such as internet disorders, they're all mechanisms in which we can cope with our emotions, and they're all as a result of really what's under the water. So what my work is helping people to understand how their subconscious was developed and really understand and discover blind spots, limiting beliefs, and unwanted behaviors.
Yeah.
And this awareness allows people to, make the shifts that they need to have a healthier relationships.
Yes. We're talking to Sandra Pate, Transformational Relationship Coach, and I'm Dr. Foojan Zeine, and you are an Inner Voice radio show. Sandra, you said very interestingly that who we are in our core self begins and kind of we come into the world within our parents and the system that we are kind of born and raised into. And many of the thought process that we have, it gets coordinated in a sense by the environment that we live in. And many of our thought process is just a direct mirroring of what that is. And then, we see whether if it's pleasurable, we'll take it in. If it's painful, we'll take it in and kind of categorize it all together. And the awareness of that, and whether I still want it or not, is it still useful for me or not, is important. The other part that the question showed up for me is that many times when we call it a heartbreak and we get hurt, we have it as something from outside came in and hurt us. We're a victim of something that happened outside. And yet by what you were also talking about, your subconscious is running you in the way that you perceive whatever is happening and coming at you. Could it also be sometimes that life is life and we just give ourselves the heartbreak by the way that we look at things, or even if an event happens that we hold the heartbreak? I mean, we're human, we're not potatoes. Obviously we have emotions and we are going to have emotion. That's the beauty of who we are as human beings. But do we also create the heartbreak and hold on to the heartbreak because of the way we were raised?
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. Yes. I think it's the way that we perceive the experiences that we have. Two different people can perceive an experience completely differently. And so that is the story that we tell ourselves. And often it is the reprogramming of the story that needs to be identified. And the way that I help people do that is to really dig into their family and look at what story they told themselves based on the family that they were in. And the purpose of looking at families is really not to place blame on your parents, but instead to take responsibility that it's not either good or bad that these experiences happen to you. There's dysfunction in every family, but just to accept and take responsibility yourself for the story that you created and how you're then reacting. And so the whole program and the whole reason for this work is to have people take greater responsibility for their healing. It's a choice. Healing your heart is definitely a choice that you make. And but we get stuck. Many times people get stuck because they can't even see what they can't see. So that's when I talk about, what's under the water in the iceberg is that in the subconscious drives us, and often we don't even understand what's in the subconscious. So I take people through a series of exercises of really looking and digging in their family and their past to see, as we do that work, it helps to bring up some aha moments for them where they're like, oh, I understand now what's happening to me. There was not a secure attachment in my family, and therefore I don't trust people, and that keeps me stuck, and it keeps me from trusting people and building healthy relationships, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. You also, the second step of the process says that you discover authentic self. Let's talk a little bit, Sandra, about authentic self. I know that self is a dynamic concept. There's no fixated self that gets created and then it kind of stays, and then that by 18 when you're an adult that your self is set, and from here on that's who you are. So definitely is a dynamic concept of working through and consistently shifting and creating and adding and purging. And when you're a teenager, one set of your brain synapses kind of purge and your personality shifts, and then when you become an adult and different phases of life brings up different parts of you as what we call the self. But there's a word you're using which is an authentic self. So could you talk a bit about that?
Yes. Well, I believe that your authentic self, you're most authentically you at childhood. And then what happens is we then have experiences which actually takes away a part of us, diminishes a part of us. And then, the inner critic, of course, becomes alive and well in us. And so what I help people do is look at the inner critic, the disowned self, and really move into, and their unique value, and then move into acceptance of who you are and recover some of who the authentic self was. And so the first step that I look at is the inner critic, and help people to understand that, the inner critic was born out of a desire to protect us and to teach us how to be more acceptable to the world around us. And when we began to get instruction and correction criticized by people who loved us, our family, our parents and our grandparents, teachers, that kind of thing, and in an effort to do its job effectively, our inner critic took note so that it could correct us before others did. And over time, the inner critic becomes overzealous, and instead of protecting us from shame and hurt, it actually makes us to feel worse about ourselves. So basically, he's a good guy gone bad, and strives for perfectionism with a constant barrage of debilitating criticism. And the inner critic really shuts us down, steals our voice, steals our authentic self, and makes us unsure of ourselves. And it sabotages relationships with those that are most important to us, and makes us question ourselves and not trust ourselves. So, I help people to identify the inner critic, to journal about what's coming up for them in terms of what the inner critic's saying, when that thought comes, what they're doing, and what the origin of that thought is. So often it's something that's been told to us by, again, a family member, or a teacher or a religious leader. And then creating some alternative thoughts to help us to reframe the inner critic. And I think that when we can look at the inner critic as a friend rather than an enemy, and somebody who actually is there to help us and to love us, then we can stop hearing what he says so harshly, because the inner critic, as you know, can be so harsh.
Yes.
And it can sound like, a voice from heaven coming down upon us and telling us how awful we are. But if we can learn to really identify and accept what's happening and then share it with others, it kind of loses its power. And at some point, we can kind of embrace that inner critic and say, thank you for that input. Thank you for showing me, for example, if I'm in my family, if I ate more than 2 cookies, my mom would say, you only eat 2 cookies. Well, if I find myself in a situation where I'm eating 3 cookies, then I might say to myself, my inner critic would say, you're such a fat pig, you overeat, you're worthless. I mean, just on and on and on. But if I can just identify this inner critic is actually trying to help me, and have some self-compassion and say, oh, I just ate 3 cookies. No big deal. I made a mistake. Next time I'm only going to eat 2 cookies. That's going to be my limit. So just embracing that inner critic and using it as somebody that actually can help us and to improve our lives is just a reframe that we can do.
Right.
And then looking at the unique value that one has also helps to empower us. So for me, it's all about empowering women and bringing them into their highest self. And so when we really can look at ourselves clearly and really tap into what makes you unique, personality traits, talents and skills, experiences and accomplishments, and review. I have women who have really lost their sense of self review that daily and remember, how unique and beautiful they are, and that no other person in the world has the same combination of experiences, personality and skills. And really it helps them to build their self-confidence as to what they've accomplished, what they've overcome, and appreciate their resilience, their resiliency that they have developed as a result of even some really negative experiences. You know, if we've experienced abuse, we often have developed independence and resiliency. If we've experienced perfectionism, we tend to be really high achievers. And so we can see the positive in the negative experiences, as well as, you know, really embracing our accomplishments that we've done from a very young age. And I find that it does several things for women. It builds their confidence. It puts women in a position of collaboration instead of competition, because when you can see your own unique value, you don't have to compete anymore. You know, it's a different mindset when you see this person can be uniquely her and I can be uniquely me, and I don't have to compete. I can just be happy with the strengths and weaknesses that I have and the strengths and weaknesses of my friend without competing. And it really puts us into a different relationship with our friends and family members.
Yes.
And also then just the self-awareness, which goes back to the inner critic. You know, as we develop these strong sense of self, it helps us to defeat the inner critic because we have a more positive view that we can reframe the inner critic with.
So the authentic self, as I'm hearing you, is not only the purity and the natural being that we were born with, but also looking at every part of us that was separated in some form or denied from some form from us, and to regain and re-accept all of those and bring them into a system where we're no longer criticizing or being punitive or nasty to ourselves, but we look at the different parts of us and their needs and whatever it's there, and then accept, and even if we need to structure or discipline ourselves in a particular way, then we handle that part that also wants to have 3 cookies or wants to do things where our other part thinks, okay, this is not healthy, right? I cannot just kind of let go of with all the impulses that I have. But instead of being punitive and critical toward that part, to be nurturing and bringing it back and having it, and that by itself takes away from re-hurting and re-traumatizing and upsetting ourselves, because not only that we might get betrayals and our expectations not being met from the outside world, or people are just going to be who people are, but there's also this other piece of the inner critic that hurts us from within, where it takes away our power. And the more that we accept who we are and our emotion and our different parts and take responsibility for it, then we're strong inside. So as the external world and whomever people are with their needs, their desires, their expectations, and whatever they do, whether they break their promises to us or not, from a space of power, from a space of centeredness and love toward ourselves and this integrated self, we are more resilient to take what comes up from outside versus taking it in and then blaming ourselves and then blaming the world and then holding the heartbreak.
Right. Yes, I do think that it's a matter of taking responsibility for our own selves and fully understanding who we are. So really the first thing is fully understanding who we are and taking back parts that we have lost. Some of us have lost our joy like the little girl because it's been shut down by being criticized either in our family or in our marriage. And so when we have a betrayal, often our self-identity is lost because we're working so hard to please everybody else around us that we lose sight of our own needs and our desires, and and really a lot of women stop developing themselves. And so it's a process of regaining all those pieces of yourself that you've lost, and reclaiming your joy and being able to love instead of living in a place of fear, living in a place of love. And that is really done by teaching women how to set stronger boundaries often.
Yes. We're talking to Sandra Pate, a transformational relationship coach. Sandra, you also complete your 3-step process by a new vision. How do you create that new vision for the women who come to you?
Right. So the first stage is really helping to integrate everything that we've learned in step 1 and step 2. It takes a lot of practice. It's not something that we just we don't just automatically overcome the inner critic or overcome some of the insecurities that we have developed based on our family. So what I try to look at in my third phase is really the vision and helping women tap into their new vision of developing better relationships, having stronger career paths, so that many people who have had low self-esteem and have been in betrayal situations for long-term marriages, they haven't developed themselves. So I help women to feel stronger about themselves and really tap into the vision. And we look at what's keeping them stuck. What's the gap between where they want to be and where they're going? And often that requires taking a look at a couple of things. Boundaries is probably the number one thing that we have to look at, is teaching other people what is acceptable to us and what is not acceptable to us. And when we're able to set clear boundaries for ourselves, we teach people how to treat us, what we'll allow, what we stop, and what we reinforce. And in doing that, we are actually taking responsibility for ourselves and our thoughts and our feelings and our actions. And then when we're treated inappropriately, then it is our decision how to handle it. And we have to set up consequences. And it's in our power to leave the relationship or set a boundary. And so it takes us out, boundaries can take us out of the victim role and into our power. It's not our job to determine the outcome of how somebody else responds. And when we can realize that we are only responsible for how we respond, and that when somebody breaks a boundary, then it's just a consequence. It doesn't need to be emotional. It's just, this is what happens and this is what I'm going to do. And it doesn't make the other person bad or good. It just means you can't be in a relationship with that person anymore. So it's all about taking responsibility for your own actions. And the other thing that I teach is teaching women how to look at what triggers them, because triggers can keep people stuck. And so I teach them how to learn to respond instead of react, which again sometimes has to do with maintaining boundaries and the way in which we communicate with people. So instead of when somebody, so say, if a woman's been betrayed and her partner is then texting a woman, or let's say she gets, her new partner gets a text that says, "I love you." Well, instead of reacting out of anger and fear, respond instead. If this is a new person in your life and you don't know who that person is, it might be the sister. It might be, a good friend. We need to slow down and ask questions before we react So then that puts us in a position of responding and being a little bit more in control of ourselves. Is one of the things that I do like to teach women, because we can, our triggers and our past can just take control of us.
So the new vision is, as you say, is determining what is the gap between what you want and what you have. And when you determine that, then you can also learn the skills of what's missing or what's holding you back from going and reaching whatever it is that you want, or at least accepting that the result that you have. And in that, you get clear, you become kind of engrossed in what reality is and accepting yourself and reality as is. And if you don't like it, then you do something about it to create it, or as close as you can get to what you want.
Yes. Yeah, and that's definitely a process. And the third stage that I go through with people is, determining, and that's a big portion, is determining what is stopping them. And as they're in practice of moving into their vision, they often get stuck and can't figure it out. Like, what's going on here? And then we have to go back to, your emotional life, your attachment styles, how your family reacted, and kind of dig and find out why they're getting stuck in an emotion. And so it's in every stage that we develop more self-realization and then can become more in control of who we are and where we want to become and where we want to go in our life.
Now, you have created a summit with 29 interviews with top experts on discovering happiness after heartbreak. What brought you to do that? So,
I really had a passion for helping women to overcome heartbreak. And so I really felt like there was a couple of things that was stopping people, and that was infidelity, sexual addiction, verbal abuse, and narcissism. They're things that are very common in our society today. So I wanted to interview people on those subjects and then look at healing modalities. So I interviewed people like you, Foojan, who have healing modalities to help people move beyond that and greater understanding. So that's what my summit is really all about. There's people who speak about the father wound and divorce-centered or child-centered divorce, many healing modalities such as EMDR, EFT, hypnosis, just ways in which that we can deal with our emotions. And so the 29 experts bring a combination of expertise that is really amazing. And I just thought that each one of the experts that I interviewed was able to bring such an amazing breadth of knowledge to the Healing After Heartbreak Summit.
I agree. I listened to many of the experts, and I've learned from each and every one of them, and it's such a great combination because it takes different paths and different modalities that are there, different views, and it's like each person takes a view of the problem or how to heal yourself from such a diverse angles that, when you're complete with the summit, listening to the summit, you gain a lot of knowledge about how to work on yourself, or even if you can't do some of these things on yourself and by yourself, you can definitely know that those are available for you out there to go and reach out to gain, the expert who's out there to support you. So go to happinessafterheartbreaksummit.com. And you can even go to the one with the /gift. And for 10 days, you can access these 29 interviews with top experts on discovering happiness after the heartbreak for yourself. It's a jewel. It's just an amazing group of people which you have brought together, Sandra. And I know it took a lot for you to be able to do that. And you've really created a beautiful wealth and a body of knowledge and experience, and to give it as a gift to your audience and our audience. I think it's great to do that. Sandra, how could people find you?
So joining the Happiness After Heartbreak series is actually the best way. Once they join that and listen to that, then they will receive weekly teachings from me, in which I do talk about each of these stages. I do weekly, I do a healing happy hour Thursdays at 4 o'clock on a Facebook Live. So once they join my community, then they will have access to those weekly teachings as well as my weekly emails, in which I present them with challenges. We started with things like the inner critic, and I provide them with worksheets on how to identify the inner critic. And then on my Facebook group, we have some communication for those who want further communication with me, as well as, all kinds of exercises that we do as a group. Mm-hmm. And so that's an ongoing teaching that I will be providing my community. So joining the summit really would be the best way at this point to join my community.
Wonderful. So go to happinessafterheartbreaksummit.com. happinessafterheartbreaksummit.com. And you can find Sandra Pate and 29 interviews with the top experts. And I know that I really enjoyed our conversation. I spoke about the awareness integration model and the details in that summit. So I also ask people to go there, and even if they want to listen to my model, they can go there. But also 28 more interviews with top experts. And Sandra, you also do one on talking about your own model in the summit, right?
No, I don't. No, I don't. Mm-mm.
I suggest for you to do.
I will have to do that in the future, won't I?
maybe put our interview today on there, so that at least they get to hear you and the jewel that you also bring. Because I think that sometimes when we are the interviewer, we give all of our attention to the other person so that they can talk about their experience. And then so on the 29 interviews, you've done that with other people. And you also have a jewel of experience and such a great 3-step process to support people and help them overcome the heartbreak and overcome their non-efficient, let's say, thinking and feeling type, where it comes from their subconscious and what they've been trained into. And so it works so beautifully if you also let them know what you have. And thank you for doing that on this show.
Perfect. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yes, good suggestion. I definitely will do that. But like I said, by joining that, they will get my weekly teachings as well. So I hope that they will do that. Because we do have a really active community that, I think that a lot of times with people who have experienced heartbreak, we really are in an isolated and lonely position. And so having a community to be a part of can be very healing.
Yes.
To know that we're not alone and that there's other people who feel the same way. And so if you want to post, something about what's going on for you, then you can know that other people are experiencing the same thing and how to handle it. I will often, I'll always respond, and then other people in the group will respond, and so it's a way of helping you to heal your heart. For me, peer groups work really well to expedite our healing.
And they can have that at the Facebook?
It does.
Is that on Facebook? Is that on the Facebook group?
Yes, on the Facebook group. Mm-hmm.
Great.
Yeah, and I, obviously, I also do group coaching in addition, so they can join my Happiness After Heartbreak coaching series, which is a 9-month program.
Beautiful.
In which we go step by step. And the beauty of the program is that we have other people in the program with us, so it's peer teaching to some extent, and that when somebody has a revelation about themselves,
it helps
they
everyone.
share the revelation, and often we're like, oh, maybe that's a buried emotion that we've had, or a buried, something buried within us that comes to light, and that's the value of peer groups.
Right. Thank you so much, Sandra. It's been a joy to have you on the show, and hopefully we'll get to talk more and more on this show and other shows. And everyone who have been listening with your heart, thank you. Thank you for being with us. And our wish is for you to take in all that works for you and take it into your heart and bring it into your action and live and create an amazing world for yourself and everyone around you. Until next week, bye-bye.
You're listening to The Inner Voice with Dr. Foojan Zeine, only on LA Talk Radio.